Good afternoon, friends. We are going to start the second session. We are only late by 1 hour, but we'll try to make it up. I am requesting Dr. S.D. Attri to kindly come and preside over this session because Tyagi Sahab has to leave for an urgent some appointment. In his place, Dr. Attri will do the obligations to us. What we will do now is that we have 2 hours for this session. So 1 hour we will devote before lunch and 1 hour after the lunch, so that lunch is not delayed too much. So we'll have 1 hour before lunch now, and at 2:15 we'll have the lunch, and again we'll meet at 2:45, and so our third session, concluding session, will get slightly delayed by half an hour, 45 minutes. So Dr. Attri will conduct the entire program, and the first speaker we have is Dhanu Roy. We have in this session 2 social scientists with us and 2 town planners, and then occupational doctor is there with us, Dr. T.K. Joshi, and Swami Gyanswarup Sanand is there with vast full of knowledge with him. So we'll all hear all of these speakers and try to learn from their experiences. May I now request Dr. Attri to please take over the proceedings.
Thank you very much, Gupta ji, and good afternoon to everybody and welcome to this second session. I think after the tea we may be little fresh because morning session was really long, and thank you for the organizers because they have given me some more liberty of the 2 hours. Otherwise it was thinking that 1 hour and it has to be very much squeezed. So all the 6 presented and during these sessions, they are from the diverse backgrounds and the vast knowledge. And I just sometimes comment that a good speaker is one who presents in the allotted time, so that focus is not lost. Without taking much time, I first request Mr. Dhanu Roy, he is social scientist, and to present his views on the Delhi air quality, and it's time 15 minutes.
Thank you for this invitation. There are a lot of people in the audience who have taught me a lot about pollution, so I hope they will bear with this presentation. My first encounter, I can't resist by starting with a story. My first encounter with air pollution comes from the coal mines of Shardol almost 40 years ago, where coal miners were suffering from pneumoconiosis. And we got 15 miners who could claim compensation for pneumoconiosis because their lung function was impaired. So we went to the district medical officer who set up a medical board to examine these 15, and the medical board examined them all and they were all declared fit. And the reason they were declared fit, as we learnt later on, is because district medical boards have been set up for the purpose of declaring candidates for employment fit. They have therefore no experience of declaring people unfit, because that goes against the grain. And this is typical of a lot of technical and professional competence in this country, that being trained in one particular area and one particular task, they tend often not to look beyond that particular task. And I think we are seeing some illustrations, with due apologies, of what is happening today also. I have, these are the 4 sources from which I have taken some material just as a prelude to my presentation. They are all well-known names, and they have a variety of presentations on ambient air pollution, curbside pollution, modeling, and source allocation, and so on. So it's useful to compare these to find out what happens to the quality of data that we have. Now, earlier we were told that carbon black has a particular trajectory. If you look at this map, it's very similar to the carbon black trajectory. And it's also interesting that there's been a lot of talk about why Delhi should be chosen, and this is precisely why Delhi should be chosen. Because there is this belt of very high pollution, and Delhi is firmly located in the center of this belt. So whatever we do in Delhi cannot get away from what's happening around it. These are two data sets, one from CPCB and the other from NERI, and you will find that they also differ. So which one to believe, which one not to believe always becomes a question, particularly when you are looking at source allocation. Where is it coming from? And what exactly is contributing to the pollutants? I'll just let you infer your own conclusions just by looking at these. They have similar data sets for NOx and SOx, and here again the polluters are fairly clearly indicated. They have similar for carbon monoxide and hydrocarbons, and once again it's fairly clear who are the main polluters. Now I present this because this has been talk about low-hanging fruit, and low-hanging fruit often tends to avoid the main polluters because they are high-hanging fruit. But we should think of somewhere reversing this trend, because tackling low-hanging fruit will always give you low-hanging results unless one tackles the main causes. This is a summary of those presentations, and what you will find is that industry, vehicles and dust seem to be the main polluters in this case. Dust is a kind of a catch-all, because dust, what does it mean? How does dust get into the air? And what proportion of it is actually because of transportation? Throwing this resuspension of particulate matter in the air. And you will get some ideas from the table on the right about, see, these tables are useful because then they, in some senses, question us in asking who do we target? Do we target the main polluters? Do we target the not so main polluters? Which ones are more dangerous? Is it just quantities we are talking about here, or is it talking about health impacts? How do we bring those health impacts into consideration, and so on? And this is taken from the NERI study, where again, they're prescribing solutions to some of these problems. And if you go down the list, shifting to natural gas seems to be a very prominent part of trying to get rid of pollutants, as well as you use various pieces of equipment like ESPs and Venturi scrubbers to take the material out of the air, so to speak, at the point of emission. Same you have with area sources control. Again, the whole thing revolves around energy distribution, how to reduce transmission losses, how to make energy use more efficient, how to make waste management more efficient, and so on. I'm just rushing through this because this is quite well known. I want to draw some conclusions out of this, which I'll come to. Now, vehicle sources control. The NERI, the first two columns are very interesting because actually they show that no matter what, percent PM and percent and NOx are going to go up. And essentially they're going to go up because the number of vehicles is going to go up. So whether you tighten norms, whether you bring down standards, it doesn't matter because the number of vehicles keeps going up, and pollutants will therefore keep going up. At the best, what they can do is try and reduce that increase. And if you look at that table, you will see that hybrids seem to offer the best possibility, as well as banning of vehicles. the increase is therefore marginal for these three. So curiously enough, it's pointing some directions, and these are the high-hanging fruits. And what these directions entail will come out a little clearer in the summary of the options. Now I'll just go down each one of those just to illustrate what are some of the problems with these prescriptions. One is cleaner fuels, CNG, LPG. We seem to forget that they come from the same source as fossil fuels. So you're not getting away from the dependence on fossil fuels. Renewables are not in the picture at all in terms of cleaner fuels. So these are very short-term measures. Those fuels are going to run out at some stage or the other, and the more we depend on them, the faster they're going to run out. Particularly if vehicle numbers keep going up. End of pipe control, everybody knows about this. It's basically a phase change. You filter out something, you put in an ESP, the ESP collects the fly ash, you put that fly ash into an ash pond, the wind comes and blows it up into the air all over again. So essentially end of pipe, we are all familiar as environmentalists, end of pipe technologies do not work, even in the short term. Then you have alternate fuels, alternate technologies, kilns, fuels, hybrids. Everywhere, the moment you talk about alternative technologies, the main resistance will come from the users of that technology, because the costs of alternative technologies are higher, product costs will go up, production costs will go up, and will they or will they not be able to compete in that market out there? So this is a huge question. Relocate the polluter, nobody really relocates large industry. We have seen whether in Patancheri or Cheru or in Kanpur or even in Delhi, the people who get relocated are the small scale ones. And essentially relocation is a phenomena which is not in my backyard. Go and pollute somebody else's backyard. Pollution does not really go away. It just shifts location. Tighten standards. This is a favorite one of most technical people, just tighten standards. But tightening standards, we've seen in Delhi, tightening standards works for a short while, and then again, because the numbers keep growing up. Tightening standards does not really contribute to bringing down ambient levels. It brings down per vehicle or per equipment levels, but it does not bring down the larger levels which we are concerned about. Banning, whether you ban burning or you ban vehicles, it's a political decision. Like, for example, the banning of, say, residues, agricultural residues in Punjab and Haryana. It's very easy to say, but unless you go a step backwards as to why agricultural residues are being burnt in such a large fashion in Punjab and Haryana, and curiously enough, it comes from an environmental measure. The environmental measure was to cut down on pumping costs for water, for irrigation. So, order was passed that paddy transplantation should be delayed. The moment you delay paddy transplantation to cut down on water irrigation costs, you reduce the time period between paddy and wheat. And then the only thing the farmer can do to get the field ready for wheat is to burn the agricultural residue. So these kind of ban procedures are very tricky, and unless there is considerable thought given to them and some ideas that come as to how banning does not create a further problem later on. If banning of vehicles, people will say, how do we travel? How do we get from point A to point B? What happens to the economy if transportation does not take place? So these are issues that we need to consider. Best practices, policies are there, use best practices, but best practices somewhere or the other again come back to costs. Best practices say you should spray water in all coal mines. The moment there's an inspection, water will be sprayed. When inspection is over, water will not be sprayed, but it will enter into the logbook that water has been sprayed. So these are issues that I think previous speakers have brought out. I'm just focusing on them. And of course, renewables, that's a big white hope, or green hope I should say, renewables. Unfortunately, with renewables, there's something called energy intensity. And renewables do not deliver that energy intensity that coal or oil gives us. So how do you actually replace non-renewables by renewables if you continue to require that same energy intensity is a question that not many people are dealing with. And eventually, finally, we come down to alternate systems, the BRT, the metro. Some speaker was speaking about walking and cycling. These are political decisions, and the best example I can give you is of the BRT in Delhi. For 5 kilometer stretch of BRT, there's a huge uproar that BRT is, messing up the city. For 5 kilometers of metro in Bangalore, there's no uproar. Why is that? What is this huge difference? Of course, granting that metro costs about 20 times more than a BRT. It's highly capital intensive, but nobody wants to talk about that. But BRT, there's a public interest litigation for BRT, saying BRT is messing up traffic, it's causing congestion. Whose traffic? Whose congestion? The 70% who are on buses? Or the 20% who are on cars and motorcycles? Who is the public? These are issues that keep coming up, and the courts seem to avoid this. Public interest litigation, anybody who comes and pleads on behalf of the environment is representing public interest. It doesn't matter that 80% of the people are not included in that public interest litigation at all. And finally, I come to this issue of public confidence, which has been mentioned again and again in the morning session, that scientists do not seem to win over public confidence. So there must be public awareness. There must be data out on websites. There must be educational programs. Only then you will get public confidence. I think this is slightly misplaced. Public confidence doesn't come so easily. If you don't deal with the problems of the public, there's not going to be public confidence. Some of the speakers today morning were talking about, when I was driving from here to there. Now, the moment you say that I was driving from here to there, you're talking about the car owner. And the car owner's view of society is very different from the perspective of the cycle rickshaw, of the cart, of the walking person, of the cycling person, and consequently public interest is something that needs to be challenged again and again if one is going to talk about public policy. For that, I've identified these 6 issues where I am just suggesting that maybe you need to stand this thing on its head. When we talk about data reliability, we are talking about equipment, we are talking about machines, we are talking about standardization. We are never talking about people, the people who actually collect data. And why are these people not being taken into confidence to collect data itself? What kind of data? This will actually it depends on the second point, which is policy is driven by expertise. And we are all experts here. It's never driven by common sense. Common sense says that congestion on roads, I should finish?
Just conclude.
Okay, I'll conclude.
Yeah.
This is my concluding bit.
Thank you.
Common sense says congestion on roads is caused by cars. Wisdom says no. Expertise says no. You must remove the cycle. You must remove the cycle rickshaw. You must remove the hand cart. You must remove the street vendor. Why? Because these are the people who stand in the way of the car going faster. That's how the poor get moved out. That's what exclusion is all about. We talk about monitoring. Why is it in the whole morning session we've not talked about biomonitoring? Because biological organisms store within them, accumulate within them the effect of all kinds of pollutants and over time. But we're talking about online monitoring, which is momentary. At that point of time, it doesn't tell you what's happening to the organism. Opportunities for participation Why are people not being drawn into this debate and discussion? Because they are the ones who suffer. They are the ones who curbside pollution as measured by Apte is about 5 to 20 times higher than ambient air pollution. Who's on the curbside? The chole wala? The bhature wala? The cyclist? Why are they not drawn into this discussion? Complexity of high hangers. This is the whole problem, because we are all experts in one field and we can't see the other fields, things become very complex. Because we are experts in our field. We are not experts in the other field. So how to link up one with the other is very problematic. But common sense says that all these things are interrelated. And people who suffer, they don't care whether PM10 is high or carbon monoxide is high, because both are going into their lungs. So what's happening to their lungs is what is important. And why is that not being drawn into this discussion? And the last one, I've already touched upon that, which is the politics of public interest. This is the politics of the higher classes, the richer people who are driving policy in this country. The poor are never taken into account. And until and unless the poor are taken into account, public confidence in whatever data we are creating, whatever policies we are driving, is never going to be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy Saab, for putting the bio perspective into the right domain. Thank you very much for fantastic presentation. Now I request the next presenter, Mr. Sagar Dara. He is also a social scientist. And 15 minutes, please.
Good afternoon. We have heard a lot of presentations, and there was a question that struck me right through the morning. I was wondering, where are the people in all these presentations? We talked about instruments, we talked about standards, and so on and so forth. And like Dunu, I would like to tell you a story. We, Dunu and I are not really social scientists. We've been given that honor and we accept it, at least I accept it with due humility, that people call me a social scientist. That apart, there was this guy called Ramappa, who was an illiterate farmer on the banks of the Kaveri. And the Harihar polyfibers plant 30 years back was polluting the river Kaveri. And he was one of the affected farmers. So, constantly he complained, then he gathered some more people and they went and protested and things of this sort. And they were assured by the Pollution Control Board, by Harihar Polyfibers, that we've controlled our pollution. There's no problem at all. He asked a very simple question. Okay, good. You're complying with the standards. Please put your intake point downstream of your plant and put your outlet upstream of the plant. For 30 years, he's not got an answer to this as to why this cannot be done. About 15 years back, when I was on the Pollution Control Board of Andhra Pradesh, we tried to implement this, what Ramappa, actually said. And believe me, the industry, the board officers, and just about everybody thought of every possible useless answer to shoot it down. It never got implemented. I won't go into the details. You can figure out for yourself why it didn't. The sum total of it, of course, was when the membership of the board, constituents of the board came up for renewal, I was the only person who was dropped for good reasons. And I thought, yes, in a way, in fact, what happened was good because I was attempting to do something, and by dropping me from the board, actually there was a very clear message that was being sent, that whose interests are we looking after, really. So I would like to talk a little bit about the people's part towards the end. But there is something else I'm going to start with out here. All this data, so I'm not going to get into all that kind of stuff. Basically, in my rovings around in this country, which I used to do in the past, which I don't do anymore, and a little bit out of the country, I have found basically three types of enterprises and three types of countries. One which essentially say that yes, we will comply with the law as is. The second, which basically says, well, we don't have all that money, we will do some today and we will do some tomorrow. And India really falls into that category. I've seen some excellent plants in this country, which compare with the best anywhere in the world that I've seen. And there is a third category, which neither pollutes, so they don't really have a problem. And that was the state of Nepal or Bhutan. Nepal, as I saw it about 25, 30 years back, for the first time, it has changed. Now, there's a simple proposition I'm going to talk about, which other speakers have touched upon, what Dunu spoke about and so on. It's called the Jevons paradox. Try as you might, you can't solve this problem of pollution in this country. Try as you might, you just can't. Why? Because we have the money to pollute. We don't have the money or the will to clean up. So the solution is not buy one technology which pollutes and then buy another technology which cleans up. The solution for this country is very different from the way it was done in the northern countries. Don't pollute in the first place. Because the people who pollute are one class, the people who suffer are different anyway. So that is why there is this dichotomy in the problem. And very quickly I'm going to go through, since I have only 15 minutes. This is a fully fossil fueled city. Now, we in Delhi or elsewhere are not in fully fossil fueled cities like what you have in the north. It costs an enormous amount of energy to make a fully fossil fueled city. And that's why our cities will continue to remain what they are today. You will have a Chandni Chowk, and there will be a difference between Delhi and, for example, Pune, and between Pune and a smaller city like Aurangabad. You will have semi-fossil fueled cities forever in the third world. Now, so you cannot, this is a map of the kind of energy consumption patterns in Eurasia and Africa. This is a reality. Now, what we as experts are attempting to do is to basically find solutions which we've studied or seen in the West. Those solutions won't work. I'm pretty clear about this. Okay, the second issue is that the minute in a semi-fossil fuel city you start putting fossil fuel vehicles, you are going to have an air pollution problem. And that air pollution problem is going to be fairly severe. The second problem, I heard this in one intergovernmental meeting, in fact, when a government official said, why is it we have virtually the same technology as the West, that, we have an air pollution problem in our cities? One of the things about tropical countries is I've looked at wind speeds across various cities across the world, not now, for many, many years. And invariably the wind speeds of cities in the tropical countries is half or even a quarter sometimes as that in northern countries. Dispersion is poor in these cities. This is common sense, actually. But yet we get into, these end of the pipe control systems and things of this sort. And when dispersion is poor, then what you have to do is pollute less. But what is coming in the way? Jevons paradox. What is the Jevons paradox? If I broaden a road, it's not as if I decrease pollution. More cars get onto that road. And the pollution level, in fact, remains the same, if not, in fact, higher. And this is what is happening in our cities. And on top of that, we go and put metros, above ground metros. You're capping the pollution, basically. Because our streets are not as wide as what fully fossil fuel streets are. We put them on narrow, maybe Delhi has wider roads, but many of the other cities which have these metros is capping the pollutants. Now, I often hear this excuse that, but we have to, pollute because we have to develop. India, Cambodia, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Laos have the same Human Development Index. They have approximately the same percentage population under what is called the poverty line, multi-dimensional poverty index. Their energy consumption is anywhere between 1/5 to approximately, let's say, half that of India, per capita energy consumption. Our fossil fuel percentage in our energy consumption basket is 73%. Theirs is anywhere like 25%, 50%, thereabouts. How is it that they developed and we haven't? I mean, how is it that they're on par? Sri Lanka is a very interesting case. Their energy consumption is half ours. They're 62 ranks above us in terms of Human Development Index. Now, there are thermodynamic answers which I've offered in a paper which I wrote for all these things, that actually biomass is more efficient for a developing country than fossil fuel. So where is the fossil fuel going? It's basically going for making profits, not to develop the poor or create infrastructure for them and so on and so forth. So this argument that we need to pollute to develop is humbug. Now, a concept called the Kuznets curve, economists know about. It works only partially. What it says is that as long as you're on the rising part of the curve, that country or society will not value environment. Once it has reached the peak, then it starts valuing the environment. But when you look at greenhouse gases, you see that, for example, the West has crossed the peak and is still putting out greenhouse gases. So it doesn't work fully. Problem is, when it comes to local air pollution and such problems, it works. So we are still on the rising part of the curve, and this fits in with what I was talking earlier, the Jevons paradox. You cannot reduce this problem by using the old route. Now, I'm going to skip some of this. I'm only going to highlight some of these points. That 75% of the total energy consumption is done by cities. And essentially, they're predators because they don't produce any energy. They're polluters, essentially. Okay, so if you look at the way urbanization has happened in the West, it happened because between 1900 to 2000, in the 100 years between 1900 to 2000, they urbanized enormously by actually stealing energy from the hinterlands. And mind you, 1 square kilometer of a city requires the biomass of 100 square kilometers in a third world country. In a developed country, they require 200 square kilometers of biomass. So they steal this energy both from the hinterlands and from their colonies, or they did. The point I'm trying to make out here is that to become a fully fossil fuel city, Delhi has no other place to go to steal this energy. It can steal to a certain extent from the hinterland. And you will see that there will be resistance. I'll show you some of the studies that we've done. Okay, in this, you said this. Again, the point I wish to make here is, how long are you going to steal? You have roughly about 40 to 45 years of oil and gas left. Maximum another 75 to 100 years of coal. So if we don't sort the problem out, in any case, this is a concept called peak oil. Peak oil will sort us out. And it will sort us out with a lot of pain. Peak oil is not going to happen without pain. And predictions are that, 7 billion, 7.125 billion could well become 2 billion, are some of the kind of predictions that are being done. So if we try to reduce pollution, let me take the transport sector. For example, in Delhi, then what we have to look at is trip distance, trip frequency, and mode of transport. And not just the mode of transport as what many people have been looking at. And we have to start then looking at out-of-the-box solutions. Let me take the field of education. If I were to, for example, say, make neighborhood schools mandate, and we did a computation of this sort on Hyderabad city, and what I have done is just projected the Hyderabad results to Delhi, you will find that immediately if you ban commercial colleges and bring in neighborhood school kind of concepts, then Delhi is going to save something like 25 million liters of diesel per annum. Automatically the pollution will come down. The question is, do we have the guts to do this? The answer is we probably don't have. You apply this kind of an analysis to every single field, essentially, every, say, health and so on and so forth. And even without very radical transformations, it is possible to solve this problem. And this is what is called shifting from engineering controls to administrative controls. Unfortunately, scientists and engineers are blinkered in many, many ways. They think of engineering control systems only. Actually, administrative controls can, in fact, at a much cheaper cost, solve this problem. The other kind of a solution for Delhi is get into carbon and energy footprinting, mandate it for all government departments, set up a standard, mandate it for all units, shops and establishments, factories and so on, over say 50 workers or 100 workers. And within a matter of a few years, this will pay dividends. Now, why do I say all this? I learned some of this some 20 odd years back when I was working in the subject of risk. And I found that the behavioral scientists, in fact, had made much more progress in tackling risk than the scientists and the engineers. They looked at the human rather than at the machine or the instrument. And they defined what is called the difference between actual and perceived risk. And there is a difference. Now, at any given point, one is above the other. It's never the same. And the higher the gap, the more difficult it is to actually manage a problem. And all these problems are related to risk. So essentially what they started saying is, get humans to understand their own risk by themselves having to work it out. And when you do that, then they are the main actors in the whole game of reducing risk. So if you are able to involve people in reducing the problem of risk or the problem of air pollution in this, then you probably will have far more success than the way we are attempting to do it today as a bunch of experts, who claim that we know a lot and actually ended up, virtually the morning session was an admission by all of us saying that we have failed. And if so, if we have failed collectively, then hand over the problem to the people, train them, allow them to take decisions. Let's advise them, but let's not believe we can solve that problem for them. We can't, not in this country. So if you want to empower, then actually I've never understood those who put in things like online monitors and so on. One of the basic things you learn in information theory is that when you have online information, it must concomitantly have online action. What is the online action so far that has been possible with online monitoring stations? I would like to know. I've asked this question of many experts who've been in this field, and I've always drawn a blank. That in this country, the only places where I've seen online action possible actually is in chemical plants, where they have SCADAs and things of this sort, where automatically, when you have an automatic control system, it is able to change if the set parameter changes, it's able to change some of the systems there to bring the whole thing back into control. Now here you have a human intervention in an online monitoring. You have to change something. What is that something that is possible to change in this country? Except, for example, when you have peaks. Now why do I say, for example, passive samplers are probably a better proposition? Because people can handle them. The second thing about air pollution is that anybody who knows the basics of toxicity will tell you that the human body, unless there is a very high concentration, is a body which, or any living being, basically it responds to dose. And that dose happens over periods of time. You don't require online systems to tell you what exactly has happened yesterday or this morning or something of that sort. What you want really is to know the dose over a month, over 2 months, to know whether something is likely to happen in this region or that region or the other. So these passive samplers are things, for example, which are far cheaper and people themselves actually can handle it, except that they can't do the analysis. But they will feel involved in trying to control their own lives. Why are we snatching this from them? Why aren't we thinking of systems where people can manage their own lives better. But instead, what we always say is, these nice toys are good for the boys.
Sagar sir. Hello.
Okay.
Please conclude. Thank
Right.
you.
The last point is actually a follow-up of 2 minutes. Right. Is Delhi can't say that it's going to solve its own problem, because Delhi requires maybe 5,500 megawatts or whatever it is. Now, that takes a lot of forest actually to sequester. We did a study around a few power plants some time back, and we found that the air pollution causes, of course, crop loss. And when we measured what is the crop loss and converted it into energy terms, we found that 15%, the plant was, for example, this particular plant in Udupi was sending 90% of its power to Bangalore and 10% locally. But the crop loss that it was causing was much more than the power it was getting from the plant, for which it was paying. Okay, the crop loss nobody compensates. What is the logic of it, which I have argued with 2 chief ministers on behalf of people's organizations, is logically, if you believe in polluters, in the polluter space principle, you should put the plant in Kaman Park. Will Delhi people agree to put 5,000 megawatts in Connaught Place? Now, this is what happens. This is a railway colony right next to the Ibrahimpatnam power plant. Entire colony had to be evacuated because it just collapsed. Colony of 3,000 people. This is what it does in Krishnapatnam. Here are women, warriors. Rare thing to see. I've seen this in Hampi. I've seen this in the Ramappa temple. Now, here is heritage, which is lost. Oh, it's just a small temple. That's what, the EIS say. Krishnapatnam, of course, the EIS have seen wind directions for the same season in entirely opposite directions. Passes through the Ministry of Environment, passes through the Pollution Control Board, whatever. Okay, I'm going to skip all this stuff. Right. So basically, if we tell the French that essentially your aircraft carrier should go back, it should not be broken in India, and we're accepting the polluter space principle, then if Delhi wants to enjoy clean power, it should also take the pollutants. Or any city for that matter of fact, Hyderabad, Pune, whatever. That is when all of us will really realize the meaning of pollution. So there are many devices of this sort. If, for example, people had to pay the sequestration cost of carbon, it will be prohibitively expensive, in fact. So essentially, if we want to control these things, we will have to think out of the box. And the last thing I want to say here is that if we don't come up with the solutions quickly enough, then this is peak oil. It's already peaked in terms of conventional oil. And once fracking, and fracking has a short life, the oil that we're extracting through fracking is over, and it'll be over in another 10 years or so, then oil is going to be on the decline. And after that, there is going to be a lot of mayhem, because what is the energy that people are going to go for? They're going to hack the forests. What will that do to the Deccan Plateau? It will put 25% of India's population at water risk. And so on, and so on, and so on. There's no end to this whole problem. So my plea to all of you is, I'm not able to go through all the slides, is essentially there are 2 things that I'm trying to say. One is involve people. Without their involvement, we can't solve this problem. The second is basically, let's learn to pollute less. That's the solution, not try to find all kinds of devices and so on and so forth to try and control that pollution. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sagar Saab, for nice presentation and putting the things in the main focus, where involvement of the people and scientists, that's the key to solve these air quality issues. Thank you. Now we have next presentation, Dr. T.K. Joshi. He is occupational health specialist, and this August community has heard him many times. Let's to hear him new things. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and the distinguished audience. Let me first make this point clear that I think many of us have this illusion that the air pollution is linked to asthma. Now, we were the first to do a good epidemiological study in Delhi in 1907. Our data did not prove that. And in fact, if you see the asthma has been rising in those countries where the air is cleanest. Australia, New Zealand, and in some of the Scandinavian countries. Yes, asthmatics do worse in the episodes of air pollution. And if the air pollution levels that are prevailing in Delhi, they were the cause of asthma, by now all of us should have turned asthmatic. This is first thing. Secondly, I should tell you that I am a surgeon half of my life, and then I turned to occupational health and environmental health, I would say, which is a discipline not taught in India. And environmental health is a very difficult discipline because for that to learn and to know, you need the knowledge of chemistry, biochemistry, industrial hygiene, ergonomics, epidemiology, and clinical sciences. And there is no institution in India, and that's why I went for my training to US. Now, besides doing the research, you actually need to have a person who has a deep understanding of environmental health. And I give you two examples. When Madam Sheila Dixit was the Chief Minister, she referred to me a person who wanted to set up oxygen joints in Delhi. And he said that this is very important, this is happening in Japan, it is happening in many places, and this will take care of the air pollution, will reduce. I totally vetoed that. I said this is absolutely nonsense. And I gave my valid reasons, which I cannot tell here, otherwise it takes a lot of time. Secondly, recently the Honorable Supreme Court, on Mr. M.C. Mehta's plea, asked Delhi government that why should not the use of mask be made mandatory. So my secretary asked me, but this is a very difficult order, and how do we go about that? So I made a note of 12 pages and sent it to him, arguing that this is illogical to make use of mask mandatory. In fact, it could be an advisory. And I gave all the reasons that, so you need to have an environmental health person to come to these things. There are so many issues in environmental health. Recently this is beside the point of air pollution, but a lady filed a suit of 1 crore against Delhi government, MTNL, and Department of Telecom. And she said her plea was that she got breast cancer, her granddaughter got kidney damage, and she is living in a house opposite which there is a tower, this tower of some telecom company. So this was a very difficult issue and to sort out. So eventually we sorted out and rejected her claim because based on the evidence that was found to be. So what I am saying that environmental health is the practical aspect. Research is a different thing. Anyone can do the research. But how to apply that research requires a deep understanding of environmental health. So I would skip many of my slides, and Gupta ji told me I'll just focus on the studies that have been done in India on environmental health. In fact, no long-term study has yet been done in India. This is the first thing. All the studies that have been done are so-called cross-sectional, which have examined the situation at one point of time. That doesn't tell you much. You need actually long-term time series studies or a very good epidemiological study. I don't know why these have not been done. So, you know about the beef history. I'll just skip all that thing. But this is, I tell you, Kirk Smith you are all familiar with. I was talking to Kirk Smith, has been a friend for a long time. I said, how do we solve the problem of air pollution in Delhi? He said, you can't solve the problem of air pollution in Delhi. You have to have a basin approach. I think some of you might understand it better. What do you mean by basin approach? But I was at ISRO station in Trivandrum last year, and they told me that throughout the 3-4 winter months, you cannot see the entire Indo-Gangetic plain. Salt covered with thick smog. So how can you solve the problem of Delhi by applying some standards and measures to Delhi? No, it's a huge problem. It is the problem of entire Indo-Gangetic plain, and it has to be, and this is the map, actually NASA map, which shows that you can't see. And we have all experienced it in the winter months, that you don't see the sun. And this is how the smog envelops the city. And it is not the creation of Delhi, it is so many other factors. So I think what Kirk Smith says that you have to have a basin approach for the entire Indo-Gangetic plain. These local measures are quick fix, they are not going to work. This is my observation, I am not an expert. So this is what OECD is projecting. Now I just, recently there was a study that so many people are going to die all the time. They use the word premature death. They never say so many people are going to die of, but they say premature. What do you mean by premature death? What is the cutoff point taken in these premature death assumptions that till up to what time we are going to live? Anyone has an idea? No, this is the most confusing thing. All these studies which are claiming that so many people are going to die premature. Premature death is like you are standing on a cliff and I give you a gentle push and you go down. So healthy people are not going to die prematurely. It is the unhealthy people who are. The cutoff point in all these studies is 70 years. And that is 70 years is factored into the calculation, be it Scandinavia, be it North America, be it India. So you can yourself make an idea about all these projections. And now this is the OECD which says that by 2050 we will have the largest number of people dying due to air pollution. All this, malaria, everything that you take into consideration will be air pollution will be the biggest premature death, not death but premature death. Anyhow, so environment has a great influence on health, there is no doubt. In fact, when I was a student, we were told that you get sick because it is in your genes. And 40 years down the lane, we have come to know that it is not the genes per se which make you sick, it is the environment. And the Ministry of Health had recently organized a very good symposium on toxicogenomics, and so I was invited to speak there. What is the gene-environment interaction, which is now the most intensively researched subject? To put it in the layman's term, if you are carrying a genes for a particular illness, it is like you are having a loaded gun. But that loaded gun will not fire till you pull the trigger. The environment acts that trigger. So even when you are carrying the genes for a particular disease, you will not get the disease, say cancer or diabetes or heart disease, unless there is a facilitating environment. And what is that facilitating? That is exposure. So what Mr. Dara said about the dose and exposure are the most difficult concepts in the entire environmental health. If you have understood the dose and if you have actually mastered how much dose has gone inside, you have become the greatest expert in the world on environmental health. This is the most. All these studies that have been done, they have not factored into their studies the exposure part. Environmental health is not about health. I think this is a misconception about in the even doctor's mind that environmental health is something about health. No, environmental health is not at all about the health. It is all about the exposure and dose. If your exposure assessment, if your dose estimation is not accurate, the entire health part falls apart. So that is, I think, where there is a great weakness, and this is the biggest challenge to environmental health. How do you actually make a correct exposure assessment? So when I was in Lyon in France, invited for one of the expert committee meeting, and I didn't know it honestly myself, I was told that today the biggest killer is lung cancer. In the early part of the 20th century, this was an unknown cancer. In 100 years, a cancer which was unknown cancer has become the biggest killer. Why? You and me have not changed. We carry the same genes that our forefathers carried 100 years back. What has changed? It is the environment that has changed. So 90% or 95% of that cancer is due to smoking, and about 3 to 5% could be due to air pollution. So that's what I just thought. Now I'll just come to this particle toxicology is a bit complicated. I'll skip that. But this is a slide which shows. First of all, this slide actually proves that the nomenclature which is being adopted by the CPCB is wrong. CPCB data says that particles with 10 micron size are respirable. We don't agree with that. And no environmental science agree with that. The particles which are greater than 2.5 micron in size, less than 10 micron, they are described as inhalable. The particles which are less than 2.5 micron are only the one which are known as respirable. So I think the CPCB nomenclature has to change. Anyhow, so I'll just, then again the deposition of particles is a big issue, and particle toxicology is a field in itself. I'll skip that. This also, but I just come to quickly to the Indian research. Now, as I told you, this was the first study that we did, epidemiological study, and it was a fairly large sample of more than 1,000 people. And what we did it both in the rural and urban setting. Now, the issue was how to assess exposure. So we used a very novel technique as a surrogate. I mean, all the your advisories tell you when there are episodes of air pollution, you should go inside, because inside there is less pollution. So we thought that a surrogate, if you question people how much time they spend outside, and we took, I mean, this is a very crude method, I tell you, but this is the advantage of epidemiological studies, that if there is a large sample size, this get neutralized. So you see the Delhiites who were urban, they had a lifetime exposure of 45,000 hours compared to the rural who had almost 1/3. And so we trained the interview, they put 3 questions. The first question was the symptoms in vehicular pollution. So if you see the urbanites, the rural population, I mean that when you go to the pollution, surprisingly they had more. They had more impact than the urbanites. But otherwise on the day, in last 1 year and on the day, the symptoms were more. We had collected a very methodical symptoms and we took the aggregate. So in other words, my biostatistician, he came to me, there's something wrong with me. I said, why? He said, when the symptoms are more in last year and one on the day in the urbanites, why, how come it can happen that when they go to the pollution, the rural people have more symptoms? I said, my dear, you have a hit jackpot. This is what we call in our discipline the tolerance. And this has been shown by John Barnes, who is one of the ace researchers in air pollution in Los Angeles when he was studying ozone. That you develop, when you are constantly exposed to air pollution, you develop tolerance. The tolerance does not mean that harm is not occurring underneath. The harm may still be occurring. But I mean, the common example of tolerance, when you go to a very stinging place, within minutes you don't feel the sting because you have developed tolerance. That doesn't mean the harm will not occur. So that was one thing. Now this was the asthmatics, as I said that we found no evidence of pollution in Delhi causing asthma, but we did find a greatly increased response by asthmatics too. And you can see the respiratory infection highly significant. The cough, everything, the asthmatics, they fare extremely badly in the episodes of pollution. There is no doubt about that. So that's why some of our chest physicians, they are recommending that people should use actually mask. Now the mask will, first of all, for an asthmatic to wear mask is not easy because it increases actually load. And secondly, a mask cannot, why I oppose the mask, I just give the reasons. I said, first of all, the masks are not designed for females. Masks are not designed for children. Masks cannot be worn by those who have beard. Mask cannot be used by those who have double chin. And a mask is useless if it makes a complete seal. And lastly, I said how a poor person can afford a mask. And in a Delhi atmosphere, the mask will clog within a maybe week. So every time he has to change. And when this H1N1 outbreak was there, the mask which sells for 50 rupees, in black it was being sold for 1,000 rupees. We don't have the capacity to manufacture that many masks if you made it mandatory. So I hope the Supreme Court has withdrawn that kind of advice. So asthmatics, this was this was with the people who were heart disease. What we found, you see the breathlessness. The breathlessness felt by those who were already having heart disease was tremendously more. And this is because when in pollution, the carbon monoxide level goes up. And the myocardium is one which is extremely susceptible to the oxygen deficiency. So that was the reason why these people, those who were having heart disease, they experience a much more breathlessness and of course other things. Now, we also had the good number of children, and what we found, and we actually questioned the teachers, that there was significant difference in mean exposure to pollution in relation to the performance in sport. That means who had higher pollution exposure, they fared badly in sports. And also we found that there was a result exhibited in attendance in school. Those who were having high exposures to pollution were also absent more frequently. So I think that way the impact of pollution is very well brought out. This was a study done by Dr. J.N. Pandey at the Allen Institute of Medical Sciences. I think this was a EU-funded study. But unfortunately, the limitation of this study was, and he found that Dr. Pandey himself, I talked to him, we actually together published a paper also, that in his experience, which is true actually, the DST. This was the largest number of deaths that occur in air pollution are due to heart attacks. And I think that is proven by all the data anywhere. The limitation of this study was that those at that time, and then Dr. Sengupta can bear it out, there was no measurement of PM10 or even PM2.5. It was only SPM was being measured. So that was the limit. Now I have summarized, these are some of the other studies which have been done, and they have come to different conclusions. In a study by Siddiqui, they found that this attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is more in children who are spending more time in pollution, and also that there is an increase in mortality. So I think all these studies, they are not long-term studies, they are short-term studies. And some recent investigations, they are also linking that these Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, they could be linked to the air pollution. Now, I just go back to this slide, and this just to highlight a very important point which some of you may not be knowing. That when, yes, I'll finish. When you inhale, some of the heavy metals which are present in the pollution, they can directly be transferred from your nasal mucosa to your brain. This is proven. Because there is a very thin, I have seen many cases of head injury when I was a surgeon, the slight perforation of nose, you get the cerebrospinal fluid of the brain coming out. So here there is a very thin dividing line between the nasal mucosa and brain. And it has been proven that stuff like manganese, if they are transferred, they will eventually lead to Parkinson. So, this is the research which has been done. And this was the air quality. Dr. Mukesh Sharma has already, we are part of it. So these are some of the research needs which US EPA actually has spelled out. And I think that these are very relevant to our situation. And I think any further research people want to attempt should be based on these kind of criteria. One of the things that we have failed to understand, why people behave differently to the same situation. Why there is so much of human variability that in the worst episode I remain alright, but people become very sick. That is something which is being also investigated. So I would just like to conclude that when you come to India as a whole, there is still dearth of data of the health outcomes associated. I'm talking about health outcomes. I'm not talking of effect. Don't confuse effect with outcome. Outcome is like cancer or heart disease. Effect is you just get some watering from your eyes or some sneezing. That I'm not talking of effect. I'm talking of the outcome. Again, many researchers confuse between the effects and the outcome. And PM10 and PM2 estimation remains a challenge, accepting futility. There has been already mentioned. And then exposure assessment is the real issue, as I've already said. And we find that the levels of oxygen, nitrogen dioxide are rising, and this could be very bad for those who are having already respiratory disease or asthma. And I think we must plan epidemiological studies which are very cheap, and if done by good people, they could deliver and give fantastic results. We don't need to do very sophisticated research. These kind of studies in an Indian setting are ideal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi, for enlightening our members with the reality of the medical impacts. Thank you very much. Now, before breaking that for the lunch, this was the last presentation. Before that, we can have a small memento from our side as matter of regards to the speakers. Request Dr. Professor J.M. Dave to kindly hand over mementos, and Gupta Sahab will assist him. First to Dr. B. Sen Gupta. He is present. Professor Mukesh Sharma. I think thank you. Dr. Saha is not there. Sri Manoj Kumar is there.
He's outside. He's outside.
Okay, then next Sri Rakesh Agarwal. Dr. Rajendra Prasad.
Very important issue. Thank you.
Mr. Moetra. And Mr. Roy. This Mr. Sagar.
It was a privilege to hear you. Thank you so much. I know you when you were from Andhra.
Yes.
I was a German.
Yeah, I remember we used to meet.
Yeah.
For sure.
And Dr. Joshi. Thank you, Professor Dave. Now we break for lunch. Thank you.
All done?
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
We'll meet after half an hour.
Position control board for the state member.